So, boys and girls, tell me, what is the story that we're going to read today? Michaela?
Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel.
And does anybody know the author of this story? Jake?
Virginia Lee Burton.
Excellent. Mike Mulligan had a steam shovel, a beautiful red steam shovel. Her name was Mary Ann. Mike Mulligan was very proud of Mary Ann. He always said that she could dig as much in a day as 100 men could dig in a week.
The most lasting memories of childhood often center around a parent or significant other reading to the child.
It was Mike Mulligan and Mary Ann and some others who cut through the high mountains so that trains could go through.
Learning language and the cadence and the beauty of a story from somebody you care for can do more to increase the skill of a child than literally anything else we can do for them.
Mike Mulligan and Mary Ann had been digging together for years.
More people have seen the art of Virginia Lee Burton than have ever seen a Jackson Pollock painting because they have encountered her in childhood, they remember her, she is part of their literary and artistic heritage. And when you have a book like Mike Mulligan and The Little House, selling millions of copies for 60 to 65 years, she's affected 65 years of children's lives and millions of children.
And Mary Ann beside him, warming up the meetings in the new town hall. Thank you, guys. That was a great story, wasn't it?
I think of her as a creative genius, working with image and text in a way that nobody else really was doing at that time. Her themes continue to have universal appeal: friendship and loyalty, love and respect, perseverance, determination, hard work, courage, bravery, and she did it in a way that made sense to children then and continue to make good sense to children today.
She made up a problem in it, and then it would end up being solved, and that's what made me excited because I wanted to know if it was going to be solved or not, and I was very excited to turn the page and read it.
In any children's book, there are two stories. There's the story for the adult and the story for the child. And in Virginia Lee Burton, the story for the child is a story of empowerment. But the story for the adult in these books is a story of nostalgia.
All of us are seeking a sense of comfort and safety and what endures, that feeling of coming back to something you know, something that feels right to you, something that you've seen before that is a friend.
When Mike Mulligan Day was celebrated in the city of Boston, adults would wander onto the set and see the steam shovel and suddenly go, oh, I remember that book from childhood. So she's in our psyches, whether, in point of fact, an adult can pull that out or not.
And so that's, to me, one of the things that keeps readers returning to these books.
The American picture book, as we talk about it, didn't begin until about 1924. Before that, there were books with holes in them and slant books. So when you see that Burton published her first book in 1937, you can see she's at the beginning of this movement, of course, and she's going to be one of its most defining members. She's really going to show what can be done in a picture book in a way that really no one else does, because she has such a strong graphic arts background. She's working in the Folly Cove design. She's trained with a sculptor. You know, she's working in an artistic community. And she takes that sensibility, weds it with text, and starts to move the American picture books to a whole other level.
What Virginia Lee Burton did, and brilliantly so during that time, was embed the voice of the child in the work that she did.
I thought everybody's mother wrote children's books, and she had this incredible willpower, very disciplined. The drawings are vital and they have a lot of spirit, but behind that is just a rock-hard discipline. And I think both of her kids got it, and her husband George was the same way. That rare mixture in an artist of discipline and passion.
I very much enjoyed just being with her because she was really a wonderful person. She had a wonderful sense of humor. She'd play practical jokes on you when you least expected them, so you did the same to her. But she was just a wonderful mother. We just always called her Jenny. We called her Mom sometimes, but it was usually, oh, Mom, you know. It wasn't necessarily a complimentary. But no, she was always Jenny.
Back in the 30s and 40s, when we didn't have all the conveniences that we do now, and she would write and illustrate books, she would have a garden, she raised 2 sons, she took lessons from her husband. They gave these tremendous parties.
I was very inspired by Virginia. In my day and age, you were supposed to stay home and take care of things. And here I met a woman who didn't do that, who did everything else too, who continued her passion.
We didn't discuss women's liberation. We just went ahead and did it. It was not you didn't think about it. I mean, I guess it depends upon where you came from. Jenny came from a family of professionals, was encouraged to be a professional, was just understood, you know, you had an interest.
She made a great contribution to children's books. She died so young, she was only 59, but it's a wonderful treasure that we have these books, and there's enough demand for them that they are kept in print.
I love the way she wrote her books and that there was always a happy ending.
I was born on August 30th, 1909, in Newton Center, Massachusetts. My mother was English, a poet, and a musician. My father was the dearly beloved Dean Burton of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, their first dean and only dean until he retired in 1921.
He was an engineer, and also he went with Admiral Perry on the expedition before he discovered the North Pole.
My memories of early childhood in Newton Corner consist of English folk songs and English folk dancing around a maypole. Instead of giving us toys for birthdays and Christmas, Dad gave us beautifully illustrated children's books, which he would read aloud to us. I'm sure my interest in picture books stemmed from this. We lived in Newton Corner until I was about 8. The New England winters were getting too much for my mother's health, and as it was time for Father to retire, we moved to California. We stayed 1 year in San Diego and then moved up the coast to Carmel by the sea. Carmel was then a simple, unspoiled town, inhabited by artists, writers, and musicians. My sister and I loved dancing and studied at every opportunity and appeared in the local productions.
One evening, Grandma went down the street about 6 blocks and moved in with a penniless inventor.
And Ginny was awakened in the middle of the night when she was 14 and told to take care of the family because my grandmother had found true love.
This was more than the family could handle, or grandfather could handle, and so the children were sent to different places.
Whatever the obstacle, she dealt with it, conquered it.
She became very independent, very self-sufficient. She had to be.
She goes to a foster home for her high school years.
And she was very interested in dance as well as in art at a very early age.
When I was 16 and a junior in high school, there was a good art teacher, and I happened to win a state scholarship to the California School of Fine Arts in San Francisco. In my senior year, I was editor of the school annual, and on the side started a dancing class of my own. Having no desire to go to college, I thought I might as well go to art school and continue studying dancing with a good ballet teacher in San Francisco, which I did.
And when she did begin to study art and dance, it was almost a bit of a balance for her to decide which career she wanted to go into, art or dance separately.
In 1928, after a year at art school, I returned east to join my father in Boston. My sister had already started her dancing career on the stage in New York, and there was a chance for me to join her troupe. I had even signed the contract. Then my father broke his leg, so I stayed home to take care of him.
And I've always said it was very fortuitous for children's illustrations that her father fell and broke his leg.
My practice in sketching on the San Francisco ferry led to a job as sketcher on the now extinct Boston Transcript. In my 2.5 years at the Transcript, I was able to see and draw the great actors and dancers of that time.
She would go to the opening of a play, and she would do a sketch of the play and finish it that night and turn it in so it could be in the paper the next morning.
Through mutual friends, I had heard of George Demetrius and what a great teacher of sculpture and drawing he was. So, in the fall of 1930, when I was 21, I enrolled in his Saturday morning drawing class at the Boston Museum School. In the spring, we were married. We lived in Lincoln, Massachusetts for a year, then moved to Folly Cove, Gloucester in 1932, where we have lived ever since.
George Demetrius was the most dynamic person, the most dynamic teacher that I ever saw or encountered or heard of. You couldn't help but learn to draw if you were in his class.
He was probably the best teacher of drawing in the country. And he started off a very poor Greek kid, having left Greece to come here.
He was very fortunate to have somebody find him when he was a shoeshine boy, sketching. And John Hybus saw that he had some talent. And he, in turn, connected him with people that were wealthy and could support an artist. And that's how he got going.
George was a pupil of Bourdelle, who was a pupil of Rodin. Among the things that they taught was there's a reason for the form to be the way it is, and so it starts with anatomy.
He talked about the ensemble and the movement and balance in every drawing that he did in every piece of sculpture. And he infused it so with philosophy that it really influenced the whole way you lived. Don't do the little things, do the big things. Get the big ideas first. And I think that is kind of how it is in life.
Charles Gravely was a mentor of his, and evidently it was kind of a mutual admiration society because Charles Gravely loaned George Demetrius his summer studio there in Gloucester.
And he liked the place so much that they decided that they would live here.
Cape Ann is, in my opinion, unique. The combination of the water and the granite and the rough edges along the water surrounding Cape Ann has all given it almost a spiritual feeling, and I do think that has to be something creative that is a stimulant here.
It was like a luxurious Eden. It satisfied them spiritually. It was a way of life they could do in relationship to nature and to the surroundings that reinforced whatever art they were working on. So that sense of place, it is a gorgeous place. When she married my father, she got a whole bunch of wonderful commissions. And then all of a sudden, the family ran out of money. When the Depression really hit by 35, my father's teaching jobs dried up, and so she decided that she had to write a children's book.
She is beginning to write, to create, at a historically tumultuous time. This is right before World War II.
My first book, Jonnifer Lint, was about a piece of dust. My friends and I thought it was very clever, but 13 publishers disagreed with us. And when I finally got the manuscript back and read it to Aris, age 3.5, he went to sleep before I could even finish it. That taught me a lesson, and from then on I worked with and for my audience, my own children.
Children's literature is unique. It's the one genre of literature in which the author is not a member of the audience for which the book is intended. She must honor the mind of the child.
And she said, okay, what do boys like? They like trains, they like steam shovels, they like snow plows, they like cable cars. And essentially, she set the subject matter for her entire body of work, sort of in that discovery.
So Ginny got got the word. So the next book, Choo Choo, which I must add is the best book because it's dedicated to me, she read it to Mike and me.
She would read the story, and when she saw, us fidgeting and goosing around, she'd realize that she had to pep that part of the writing up.
And her regime from then on was to read, if you could read the same story for 1 month straight to the same people and they didn't fall asleep, then that was a good story.
In 1937, she published Choo Choo, the story of a steam engine who goes to the big city and suffers a perilous downhill ride.
People loved the spirit and the movement and the idea of her stories, and one thing that Ginny had going for her from the beginning is a person who could be both the author and the illustrator of a book.
She was doing that literally all by herself. And this first one was in black and white with a Conte crayon. And black Conte was what my uncle used to teach students when they were in class doing drawings from a model.
There's nothing static in her books, and that steam train is going right ahead. And through all the pages in her books, there's a sense of motion. Sometimes when you look at the drawings in her books, there's a dance on the page that comes along with that wonderful sense of movement that she enjoyed so much.
One of the reasons that Choo Choo endures is because of her command of the narrative. Very poetic. There's that area in the book where the type changes, the words become fragmented. There's this kind of choo, 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 cha, cha. It's like poetry.
So as children begin to also be able to read the words, they are drawn into the images through the words and into the words through the images. Each illustration in all of her books, from the black and white illustrations of Choo Choo to the more elaborate designs of Mike Mulligan, in each case, the illustrations invite the children to look very closely. There are so many details.
The thing, of course, that most children love is the details. These are end papers. This is no place else in the book, and yet I have known little boys to study this as if it were the Bible itself. And it is for them for a period of time because this tells them everything that you want to know about the steam shovel.
Virginia Lee Burton had a real feeling for detail, which is something that I've tried to put into my books, and that I've always appreciated. When I was a young reader, I loved to just spend hours wandering through the details that an illustrator would lay out for me, and she was very generous with her details. And if you search for the expression on Mary Ann the steam shovel's face, she was very poignant or very exuberant, or she really was a very, very vivid character.
This would be what we would call now concrete poetry, essentially. You see the image of the text reflects the building image on this page. And so you're seeing a building and you're seeing type in the shape of a building. And by bringing together both text and art, she managed to move the picture book forward in a whole new way. Every double-page spread is different than the one before. This marvelous picture of the gossips. Here they're gossiping and talking, and the text just swerves and swerves and swerves around. So you have the movement of people talking.
She had a conversation with my grandmother, and she said that she was doing a book about a steam shovel, and she needed to get some characters for the book. The town meeting was coming up, and so my grandmother said, well, come along up and I'll make the arrangements. Just sit quietly and sketch, as long as you don't try to vote. And a great many of the characters in the book are people that she sketched from the town meeting.
She was very good at making a caricature that clearly belongs to a certain person. I was model for Mike Mulligan and Choo Choo, I'm very pleased to say.
Many of Virginia Lee Burton's characters are female, but there's a male counterpart. And They work together, Mike Mulligan and Mary Ann. That kind of partnership is very important.
I think of it as trains, planes, and automobiles. The steam shovel is involved in the exciting work of modernization, and yet that modernization catches up with Mary Ann, and Mary Ann finds herself on the scrap heap until Mike Mulligan figures out a task for her.
Mary Ann is really threatened there for a while. I mean, she puts real drama into the stories, and kids know fear and they know anxiety. They're no strangers to those darker emotions. In fact, they experience them very vividly, as we all know. She was very gutsy in terms of taking her reader right to the brink.
There's so much excitement when Mike Mulligan and Mary Ann are digging the hole for the cellar. You wonder what's going to happen. And then, the solution.
And it's the little boy who solves that by coming up with an ingenious new idea for employing Mike Mulligan and Mary Ann.
My grandmother had invited her back here to the farm for supper after the town meeting, and she said, I've kind of reached an impasse on the book because like the fellow who paints himself into a corner, I've got the steam shovel that's dug the cellar and forgot to leave a way out. And what do I do about it? And I was 13 years old, and I said, well, why don't you make the steam shovel into the heating system for the town hall? She says, can you do that? And I said, I don't see why you couldn't. And so that's how the story ended.
So even back then and now, the child is empowered.
I jokingly call these books chick books for boys, you know, because you have the strongest female heroines in them.
One of the things that shows that up is this book called Calico, the Wonder Horse. She introduces the horse by saying way out west in Cactus County there was a horse named Calico. She wasn't very pretty, but she was smart. She was the smartest, fastest horse in all of Calico country.
It came out around the 1940, early 40s. This is before television, and the comic books were, you know, where children were getting the things that they shouldn't be getting, learning.
The comics, the funnies, and the radio programs absorbed him completely. And not only him, but all the other boys his age. Here was something to look into. What was it that held them so enthralled? These books and programs satisfied a natural craving for excitement, for action, drama, gave the children a hero to worship, and an escape into thrilling adventure that is wanted by any normal child.
Calico is the clearest example that we have of her response to her sons. And you really have a story that very much moves forward in the comic book format. This is really an early graphic novel. She uses all the techniques, the frames.
I had been working on design and now had a chance to use it. In design, movement is opposed to monotony. The circle or half circle is at rest. Developed into a spiral, it moves. A right angle is stationary, a slight variation in degree, and it immediately takes on life. My book began to be what my family called a symphony in comics.
When they came down to printing it, they didn't have paper. It was wartime years. And she, you know, she's a great inventor, and they could get a hold of the old Sunday school paper of different colors. That was the only paper they could get. So Burton then framed those papers so that they helped tell part of the story. So it starts in green and a quiet time. As you move through the story, it moves into the reds, and then there's a very happy, sunny ending, which occurs in the yellow in the pages. So it's an example of how she could stretch her art, and in fact, it looks more contemporary now than even Mike Mulligan and Little House and some of her other classic books.
Foley Cove Designers begins because Ino Clark was a violin teacher and wanted to learn design, and my mother decided I should have violin lessons, so they traded, and then within about 2 years Ino's friends wanted the lessons also, and so Ginny then had design class once a month, and that parlayed into the Foley Cove Designers, which was in Life magazine 5 years from the time of that first conversation between Ino and my mother.
That's incredibly important that it started off as a utilitarian kind of thing. That is actually very much in the spirit of the arts and crafts movement. One of the main tenets of arts and crafts movement is create nothing that's not useful and also beautiful.
The Folly Cove designers are a very interesting example of a highly creative group of people who worked with art as part of their daily lives. They found a catalyst in Virginia Lee Burton, Demetrius.
She believed that everybody had the God within them. If someone was willing to work, they might not be a genius or anything like that, but they could do wonderful art. And in so doing, sensitize themselves so they could really appreciate all art.
She really made people look and decide what they were going to do, and she kept saying, don't copy from anything, just look and observe and draw from nature.
Some of the subject matter that you see in the Folly Cove designers really speaks to that idea of a sense of place. They show their own gardens, they show elements of their own lives worked into the blocks. Something like Head of the Cove by Louise Kenyon has elements of Annisquam, Massachusetts. These are actual recognizable buildings that are still existing in the local community.
It really is referring to the pleasures of seaside life, of rural life in some cases, of the garden, of dancing. And these are all things that are very much within their world. It's completely familiar.
When the Folly Cove designers first began in 1938, it was just before World War II, and there was a big shortage of fabric, and you couldn't get pretty things.
It was a plain life in the sense that a lot of the food came from your own garden. That was very typical of Cape Ann. We didn't have supermarkets at Cape Ann until well into the 60s, so it was what your own family and your own household produced.
That's one of the reasons the Folly Cove designers took on so much, because by just taking a scrap of linoleum and making a beautiful design, you could make your own pretty things.
They are such a powerful example of that integration of art and daily life. You can wear them, you can use them as upholstery, you can hang them on your walls.
What's really mind-boggling about this is the level of sophistication of the craftsmanship. It's easy to point to certain antecedents, the arts and crafts movement, Scandinavian folk art, modernism, when you look at the level of abstraction, or even children's storybook illustration, the way there's often a beginning and a middle and an end.
Virginia Lee Demetrius actually used some of her own children's literature as a subject for some of her textile work. So, for example, there is a Folly Cove designer textile pattern called The Little House.
Writing The Little House came from the fact that when she and her husband first moved to Gloucester, to the Folly Cove area, they bought a house that was very close to the highway. So they moved that house back into the apple orchard, and they planted daisies all around because it was her favorite flower. Moving the house, she said, was a part of that experience for her of writing this book.
She understood that the visual and physical environment in which you raise a child or in which you decide to root down yourself is very important in terms of experiencing a sense of well-being.
In the case of The Little House, published in the early 40s, folks were really concerned about World War II. And in that case, the theme of safety, a sense of solace, a sense of comfort, they never go away. Those ideals don't go out of style.
One of the things that Burton always maintained was that good book design, good design principles were timeless. They were universal. And as long as you kept those elements in a book, you would keep a book that would stay alive. One of the fascinating elements of the design in The Little House, which often people don't see, The Little House is located virtually on the same spot as it moves through time. But everything around it changes so much that you never notice that she has not changed the focal point of her design. Now with Burton, harmonious elements are always in this sweeping circle. It's a lovely, circular, round, whole feeling. The world out of harmony is when you have the strong diagonal lines come in. We start getting more strident elements within this story. She's so good at getting the eyes of the little house. They draw you right there, and you begin to look at how sad it becomes. Now the mess, the confusion, the diagonal lines has started to take over the whole world. Fortunately, of course, Burton is ever an optimist. And then we're going to get the little house moved. Once again, it's going to go back to its spot, but this time its spot is set in these circles.
The Little House maybe was the first sociology text for children. She was also thinking very clearly, very consciously about the embedded, the implicit, as well as the explicit messages in her text.
The Little House is Rachel Carson for children. Her work has a strong environmental component to it. She is in the Little House talking about the problems of too many people and too many buildings and what we're doing to the country and what we're doing to the land. But again, like her feminist messages, like her other messages, it's very subtly interwoven in the book.
Virginia Lee Burton was ahead of her time in so many ways. There's so much urbanization happening, and she tapped into it even back then, even in the 1940s.
First time I saw Jenny was when she came into Houghton Mifflin. And she was worried about going to New York to accept the Caldecott Award, which had been given to her book, The Little House. I think it was something that made Jenny gasp a little bit. On the other hand, Jenny is a great performer, and she had the confidence to talk about her books and a passion in talking about them. So when she did give her acceptance speech, it went very, very well.
Many people have said that The Little House has a message, that the further away we get from nature and the simple way of life, the less happy we are. For my part, I am quite willing to let this be its message. But apart from the significance of any one book, it seems to me that books for children are among the most powerful influences in shaping their lives and tastes. In this sense, these books are an important means of advancing to a better world, for the future lies to some extent in the hands of the children of today. Tomorrow, their ideas and their tastes will be the ones that count. Remember, too, the basic things are always the most important, and good art, certainly a basic thing, impressed on young minds through the medium of children's books, is without doubt one of the best possible ways of giving children a true conception of the world they live in.
Everybody in Folly Cove had this way of doing creative things. They wrote books, they cut the linoleum prints, they did drawings, they did paintings, they did sculpture. And he had a big summer party every year. George did. He would cook lamb, and we would have these huge, gigantic bowls of salad. I mean, we had so much fun at those parties.
It was a sense of people getting together, enjoying each other's company, and ending up doing Greek dancing on the lawn, or square dancing in the barn, or singing.
There's a Greek, my father. My mother's English Yankee, and it's all Finns around here. So when we would get the neighborhood together, we all learned the Finnish songs. The Finns learned all the Greek songs, and then my mother taught everybody the English madrigals.
My mother's song was "Oh No, John," the English ballad. You know, on yonder hill there stands a creature, who she is I do not know. I'll go and court her for her beauty. Madam, answer yes or no. Oh no, John, no, John, no, John, no. And there were, I can't remember the rest of the verses, but that was her song. And of course, my father had a litany of Greek songs.
And we'd sit down there, or in the barn in the winters with the fire blazing, and just sing all the time. It was just beautiful.
Killi, killi, killiani, Pekka, Pekka, puskuri, pessian, Pekka, Pekka, pessiani. Aurinko mailen lasketi, missä tavan kultani viiperpi, le matavatan, o mana, o le matavatan, o ni. That's a little below my range.
We got through it.
Yeah, I missed the last sitter, but that's okay. No one will know. No one knows Finnish.
When things were a little rough here on Cape Ann from a survival point of view, they gave a lot of people a lot of pleasure and helped people find inside of themselves some of the delights of just being alive.
Certainly there is an element of humor in many of the designs. Something like the gossips shows a kind of witty pattern of women sharing the latest news. Another of my favorites is called Spring Lambs. It's a wonderful depiction of the moment in spring when the grass is first turning green, the flowers are budding, the sheep were let out into the pasture for the first time after the winter, and of course the birthing of the baby lambs. And this particular design really captured that moment. I had the privilege of growing up in Folly Cove and knew the Demetrius family as a child. And I think something like this really draws back for me some memories of particular times from my own childhood.
The big tree was the swing tree, and that was right here. And the swing tree had the two arms that went out, you know, the two branches, and there was a swing on one side for my brother and a swing on the other side for me.
For Burton, the place was always critical in the books themselves. Those books where the artist gets a sense of place have a tremendous power for the child because you want to be grounded in the world. You want to be somewhere. Katie and the Big Snow, the sense of place is Gloucester and what goes on in a city during a snowstorm.
That's something that Virginia Lee Burton pioneered, that sense of laying out the town. And so you have these wonderful spreads in which the map keeps developing as Katie plows the big snow. It's an organic connection to a community in which you have your job, and your job is important in keeping the community functioning. She's created a career for herself by really creating from her position as a mother.
We do sense with her books that they get older as her children get older. So they're teenagers by the time she gets to the Song of Robin Hood.
She would have them actually in costume as well as out in her yard practicing archery with bows and arrows so she could get the feel of the strength in the arm and the fling of the bow as it went.
Robin Hood took 3 years. She illustrated it. She got like $400 for it, which is a ridiculous sum. They didn't print many copies, but she developed a whole new technique.
That's a remarkable job, not only in design, but in execution, because on scratchboard you paint black and then you scratch away what you don't want to be black, and that's hard. She did such fine design on that one that it just got to be almost impossible to see.
She started with brilliant eyesight. 20/20, she ended up having glasses.
She was extremely observant of nature. She used to love to go for a walk, and she'd come back with all these little bouquets of twigs and sticks and flowers and things and put them around where she could see them. And when she worked on that wonderful Song of Robin Hood, those drawings that illustrate each verse, there's a lot of nature that goes into those. And she had actually made a study for the illustrations of what was in the ballads. and the setting in England. And that was the kind of thing that she really enjoyed doing very much.
The thing is glorious. And also the lesson, well, both parents did this, no matter what you do it well. That's the Greek ethic and that's the Yankee ethic. I'm half Yankee and half Greek, and my wife calls me Zorba the Wasp.
The Folly Cove designers had a barn that was owned by the Demetrius family right at the head of Folly Cove, and the building is still standing in Lanesville. It was open seasonally during the summer months, and people could stop by and purchase the fabrics there. As you entered the barn, there were large panels of all of the design motifs hung on the walls, and it just was a really engaging place to meet with the designers.
The designers as a group would meet for work and jury meetings over designs about once a month in the barn.
And if you wanted to be a designer, you had to conceive of a design, refine it with some coaching from Ginny most likely, or from other members of the group. And if your design was submitted to the jury and passed, you were then officially a Folly Cove designer.
Each of the designers did the entire production of the textiles.
I don't think I was officially inducted until I produced my first big block, which is the geraniums.
Some of the designs also explore larger topics in American life. The atomic age, there's one on the jazz age. Virginia Lee Demetrius did a pattern called commuting. She did reducing, which shows women in the early exercise and dieting craze that has certainly continued to be something that continues even to the present day. So while some of the design motifs are of timeless and universal themes, others of them are very much of the moment. When you visited the designers at the barn, they often were at their work.
They would break for lunch, and then everybody would go down to Folly Cove and go swimming in that freezing cold water.
One of the designers always came down with a thermometer. She'd attach it to her foot and swim across the cove and come back with a report. It was 51 or something like that. We all swam in cold water. Jiminy was a great swimmer. Jiminy really was an athlete. Great vitality and energy and discipline.
She was an excellent teacher, and she had her lifestyle with the Folly Cove designers was an amazing thing. Everyone was supposed to be equal, but obviously one was more equal than the others, and yet that worked. And they became very good, but they also knew that she had the best eye, and they realized that she was the leader, and the spiritual leader as well as the artistic leader.
I do have a lasting impression of her as being this amazing spirit who was able to do and to lead others to do some very special things in one's life.
The fact that she was able to take people who had an interest and give them a design feeling and have them all work together harmoniously, it's got to have a ripple effect into the generations after them.
Integrating art into your daily life and making usable things is a wonderful thesis that should be encouraged. And certainly I can't tell people what I do here without talking about her, because she's the one who started this tradition.
I see in Virginia Lee Burton someone who is thinking quite profoundly and translating into children's terms. How do we think about ourselves in a world that's changing very quickly? A common thematic element in her books is an initial displacement, whether it's Marianne losing her function as the steam shovel, or Choo-Choo deciding to jump the tracks and go off on her own, or Mabel the cable car being put out to pasture, if you can put a cable car out to pasture in San Francisco, and finding a new place in a world that's changing.
The sense of place truly varies for her book to book to book. I think she really is putting it where it's set. Mabel the Cable Car is definitely a San Francisco city story. So she is always grounded in a particular locale and getting a feeling of that locale. It's often a character in the story. When you go up and down the streets of San Francisco, you can see that she's captured them completely in Mabel. But then, of course, you have to find the story. At the heart of all of Burton's work, she is talking about how, as American society changes, we have to make way for the old. And it's absolutely true to American experience. We are a country constantly changing. It's as true today as it was in 1943. And of course, she's giving this message to those people who are going to be the instruments of change, the children themselves.
How do we think about ourselves in relationship to mobility on the one hand and obsolescence on the other hand? How do we find a place? How do we craft a world that embodies all of the values of work and community that I hold dear?
People want to come back here. There's a sense of this place that draws people back. The same as Ginny and George's sense of house and yard and garden and creativity gives something to people.
Always there were painters underfoot. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere on any street or any vista on Cape Ann without bumping into at least 3 painters who were professional painters painting the landscape or the seascapes. I mean, I just thought that this is the way the world was.
Most of the time it was just about what creative thing are you doing right now? Are you working on a book? Are you working on a design? Are you doing a painting?
When George finished a sculpture, the first person he asked to see it was Ginny. When Ginny did a book, the first person she asked to look at it was George. And on that, they were as one.
The whole idea, it's in every one of her books. The movement, the balance, you see that in every drawing. It's all there. So they were a good team.
She assumed, and my father agreed, that men and women were totally equal. Although my father had a streak of the patriarch in him, which said that women are almost equal. And Ginny would just, boom, right back at him.
A lot of people said they had a sort of difficult relationships between them a lot of time. But I think that they had a wonderful life together in the sense that they had this artistic life in this artistic place surrounded by artistic and creative people. And I think they both thrived with that. Their whole life was just for art. But I learned a big thing from that, and that is you need to live your life and do your work.
She was truly a Renaissance woman, and her life is a reminder that a woman can do many things, that raising a family and doing work that you love, those two ideas do not have to be mutually exclusive. And there were so many other creative aspects to life that inspired her and inspire others. She was a dancer, a designer, a painter, a sculptor.
She understood, perhaps better than some people do today, that you can create a life, compose a life, through sewing together odds and ends, almost like a patchwork quilt. That in the creation of children's books, she could find a profound way of satisfying her own artistic ambitions, and then made out of what was initially kind of community teaching of art, this wonderful circle of arts and crafts designers. And so she really composed a life very much on her own terms, taking the circumstances that she was both dealt and chose to develop a life of extraordinary creative achievement.
Ginny's work always had something to say to you. And one of the reasons her books have been alive so long is because that still resonates in your mind.
Virginia Lee Burton's work has endured is because she really deals with enduring issues, whether we lived in the 40s or whether we live in the early part of the 21st century. There really are still important issues to children, important issues to adults, and the solutions will always need to be rethought and restructured to fit a changing world, but they're there in her book. She gives you the tools, and she does it in a very appealing and a very available and a very artistically satisfying way.
Any artist after her has to study what she did, because from the front cover till the back cover, she's creating books that are total works of art.
They really are passed down from one person to another. So there is a living quality to all that work.
From the beginning of her time until Life's Story, we have a whole continuum of someone who's taken the book, loves the form, develops it, makes it work, and then she adds stories to it that children want to hear again and again, and you've got everything.
The last book that she did, which is called Life Story, and someone said to me, is that her life story? Well, it's a combination. It's really a history of the geology of the world. But she spends about the last 25 pages talking about her life in Folly Cove.
Life Story, which says simply on the title page, the story of life on our earth from its beginning up to now, is the most massive concept for a picture book ever executed. In these 64 pages, she takes us through all of history, and she moves us through the history of the planets and the history of the rocks and then the history of the earth. And she sets it up as a stage, and she brings on different narrators on that stage. And the final section brings it up to our time here on earth, to the little house again, where she and her family are located. And then she gives us the final page, which is really her final statement.
And now it is your life story, and it is you who plays the leading role. The stage is set, the time is now, and the place wherever you are. Each passing second, a new link in the endless chain of time. The drama of life is a continuous story, ever new, ever changing, and ever wondrous to behold.
So on that very optimistic note, Virginia Lee Burton finished her final book.
We have Jenny goes to heaven with her feet kicking up in the air and her arms out like this. And that was, my father did that after she died. Kicking her feet up in the air and as she was, just full of joy and warmth. It was an incredible, nurturing place to grow up in. And both my brother and I were very fortunate to grow up in that atmosphere.
It's still gorgeous. And I can look around and see trees I climbed and blackberries I ate. It's a great place. It was a glorious place to become a human being in. And I'm lucky that my parents elected to stay here rather than go into the big city and do their careers there.
Her legacy to me is that she gave me a foundation of trust and joy upon which I base my life. To others, she has given a legacy of possibility and love and concern about what's around you and to make the best of whatever that may be. She could find wonder in just about anything.
And now it is your life story, and it is you who plays the leading role. The stage is set, the time is now, and the place, wherever you are.